This marks, I believe, the fourth or fifth year, in which we have cooperated with Bani and with her gracious colleagues in the office. One of the motivations is the particular vision that the office has and that the Baha'i faith has, particularly with reference to our topic this evening of economic and social inequality. In the faith, all human beings have been created to carry forward an ever-advancing civilization. This is according to the sacred scriptures of the Baha'i faith. The notion that every nation, every community and person has a part to play in the building of a peaceful and prosperous global society is central to the work of the Baha'i International Community's offices around the world. Their efforts seek to reflect the vision and are informed by a number of related convictions, which I believe Bani will touch upon in her remarks. First, that humanity is in the midst of an ongoing process of spiritual, moral, social, and scientific development. That it stands today at the threshold of a new stage of global connection and interdependence. That the hallmark of this stage will be a growing awareness of the oneness of humankind, a principle that will come to infuse all facets of organized life. So with these preliminary ideas in mind, I would like to invite Bani to speak to us about economic and social inequality according to the writings of the scriptures. Thank you so much, Bani.
Thank you, Colette. It's always a pleasure to speak to your class, and the one thing I really enjoy is the diversity, not only of where all your students are from, but even the concentrations, the areas of interest, and academic pursuits, and I think the combination just makes for a really interesting discussion and an interesting challenge as to how to focus the remarks that we are going to make, because I think you pretty much cover all the various areas, and I think the ambassador from Sweden will also possibly touch upon a number of your concentrations in her remarks as well, because I think the UN is focused on a lot of the issues that you're studying. But that said, I'll share a little bit about myself. Professor Mazzucelli asked me to go back to my previous life as a lawyer in India. And so in the 1980s, I graduated from law school in New Delhi and started work at the Supreme Court of India. And I was a young lawyer at the time, and it was interesting because more than 50% of my class were women, and quite a few young lawyers were women, and gradually we'd see the dropout rate because the circumstances, it wasn't the most hospitable environment for a young woman to be working in. And unless you had the support of family support or that of a husband later in life, it was hard to work as a lawyer at the time. I'm happy to say that things have changed since, and there are many very dynamic law firms headed or solely staffed by women attorneys in India. But I was fortunate in the sense I was dating a lawyer, a fellow student, and my father-in-law was a judge. And he decided to retire early and come to practice at the Supreme Court, and so I started working in his chambers. So I had that little advantage. However, I realized, his kind of practice was not exactly what I was interested in, and I wanted to work in human rights and women's rights, and so the best way to do that was to work with the Legal Aid Society in my free time. And that's what actually I go to for my experience when I'm looking for real experience from the grassroots today, because working at the UN, sometimes we forget what's happening really at in the real world, and we are talking about policy, etc., at the international level.